Do you remember the TV game show Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Where contestants attempted to answer fifth grade questions for prizes. The answers given were often hilarious. What if they weren't fifth grade questions, though, but civic questions? Would the answers the American people give still be funny? We'll talk about that next on the Constitution Study.
Neighbors and have a few good friends. Every day we're everyday Americans. Oh, every day we're everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution, teach, rise, and generation be free. Glad you could join me today. I find it interesting that people work hard to become a naturalized citizen, but it seems that people that are already here really don't care. And I found some interesting statistics that I want to talk about in this episode. If you want to find out more, if you want to follow along, check my sources, well, go to the website, constitutionstudy.com, and check out the article. I've got links to all of my sources there. Now, I'll talk more about the website and what you can do there at the end of the episode, but for now, let's answer this question. Are you smarter than a naturalized citizen? To become a naturalized United States citizen takes more than just an application and an oath. It requires the passing of a test. Now, out of 128 possible questions, 20 are randomly chosen for each test. For an applicant to pass the test, they must correctly answer 12 of the 20 questions chosen for them. Now, we can argue whether or not a 60% should be passing or not, but data from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service show that 88% pass on their first attempt and 95% pass on their second. Now, how does the population as a whole do when it comes to the citizenship test? According to a 2018 study by the Institute for Citizens and Scholars, only 36% of Americans could actually pass the U.S. citizenship test. Remember, passing is only a 60% score on a multiple choice test. Some of the details were truly disappointing. Only 13% of those surveyed knew when the U.S. Constitution was ratified. And despite the recent media spotlight on the U.S. Supreme Court, 57% of those surveyed did not know how many justices actually serve on the nation's highest court. This failure to teach basic civics has gotten worse over time. Surprisingly, the poll found stark gaps in knowledge depending on age. Those 65 years and older scored the best, with 74% answering at least 6 in 10 questions correctly. For those under the age of 45, only 19% passed the exam, with 81% scoring a 59% or lower. I'm not sure why the publisher of this survey was surprised by the age gap in knowledge of basic civics. After all, it closely mirrors the National Assessment of Education Progress, or the nation's report card, on students' knowledge of basic civics. As shown in the report, the average score for 8th graders barely rose above 50%. This is just an example of the data showing not only the general lack of civics knowledge, but that our civics education is making things worse. Those 65 and older who attended primary and secondary school more than 40 years ago were able to pass the citizenship test 74% of the time. Meanwhile, those under 45 attending school less than 30 years ago could only pass 19% of the time. Something significantly changed in the 20-year gap between those two groups. I suggest that since the United States Department of Education was created in that time window, it's logical to suggest it is a significant reason for the decline in civic knowledge among the American people. Why do people seeking naturalization not just pass the test at a higher rate, but significantly higher? I think the evidence shows two reasons. First, if you're taking the test to become a citizen, you are motivated to pass it. Compare that motivation to a student being forced to take a test. Yes, they're motivated to pass a test, but not nearly as motivated as someone seeking citizenship. The second reason is a failure of our educational system. Now, by educational system, I don't just mean our public schools, which have consistently shown themselves to be a failure. When I talk about our educational system, I have to include the state politicians who have created the stupid laws that trap children in failing schools, the federal government which embezzles billions of dollars every year to bribe schools into teaching doctrine or dogma rather than civics, and the parents who have turned their children over to a failing government system in the vain hope they learn enough to survive. While this corrupt system may create enough people to keep the economy going, it's obviously not creating adults with a basic education needed to be effective citizens. Now, people who want to become citizens are motivated to learn civics, while the rest of us are not. So what's the big deal? Why is it so important that we be able to answer questions like, what is the form of government of the United States? Or what is the supreme law of the land? Or name the 3 branches of government? The answer is simple. How do you know if government actors are following the law if you don't even know what the basics of that law is? If you don't know what form of government the United States has, what would keep you from believing those who claim we are a democracy or those who are trying to institute Marxism? Every member of government, state, local, and federal, takes an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, the supreme law of the land. Well, how do you know if they're doing their job if you don't know the Constitution either? How can you tell when the president, a federal court, or Congress violates the separation of powers if you don't even know the separation exists? In other words, how can you participate in a country when you have no idea how it's supposed to work? Amid Cold War fears in 1950, Congress added a requirement for applicants to demonstrate a knowledge and understanding of the fundamentals of the history and the principles and form of government of the United States. And if Congress thought it was important that those who want to become citizens demonstrate a knowledge and understanding of the fundamentals of the history, principles, and form of government, why wouldn't we want everyday Americans to have that as well? If someone is already a citizen, they cannot be forced to demonstrate that knowledge in order to exercise the powers of citizens. But shouldn't we want them to have such knowledge anyway? A civics education is not just about passing a test. As Merriam-Webster defines it, civics is a social science dealing with the rights and duties of citizens. How can we be good citizens if we're unfamiliar with the rights and duties of citizenship? Put another way, how can you live free if you don't know how to? How can we protect our rights if we don't know how or where they're protected? How can we have a government of, by, and for the people if we don't even know how said government is supposed to work? We live in a constitutional republic. That means we, the people, choose others to represent us. How can we expect people to choose those who will follow the Constitution if they have no idea what it says? How can we expect the rising generation to defend liberty if they have no clue what liberty is? How can we be the land of the free if those choosing our representatives don't know what freedom is? This lack of basic civic literacy is not simply an academic question. It literally will shape the nation and its people for a generation. Now, this might seem like an insurmountable problem. The solution is really quite simple, if not easy. To understand the solution, I have to point out a fundamental fact that has been lost in our history. It is the responsibility of the parents to raise and educate their children. The fact has been confirmed by Supreme Court in the 1923 case Myers versus Nebraska and numerous cases since. That means the schools, even public schools, are there to assist parents in the education of their children, not to do it for them. Sadly, this fundamental fact of education is rarely talked about except in a few court cases. But this fact is the key to the solution of our civics problem. The focus on fixing the civics problem shouldn't be getting schools to teach civics. Why? Because schools can teach anything as civics. Schools can teach, and in some cases have taught, everything from Marxism to DEI as civics. But that doesn't mean their students are prepared to exercise the rights and duties of a citizen in a constitutional republic. Let's start with a quote from the first Chief Justice of the United States, John Jay. Every member of the state ought diligently to read and study the Constitution of his country, teach your rising generation be free. By knowing their rights, they'll sooner perceive when they are violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. Notice two things. First, Mr. Jay states that every member of the state ought diligently to read and study the Constitution of their country. The Constitution of the United States isn't just for lawyers, judges, and politicians. It's for everyone. Second, look what studying the Constitution gets a person. Not only knowledge of their rights, but how to defend and assert them. Put another way, reading and studying the Constitution is a fundamental step toward learning the rights and duties of citizenship. It is the cornerstone of a civics education in the United States. Guess what? You don't need a special education in order to read and study the Constitution. Neither do you need credentials to teach it to your children or others. So the simple first step in restoring civics in our country is for people to start reading and studying the Constitution. That, however, is the easy part. The harder part is to work to restore accurate civics education in our schools. Now that we know, or maybe just have more evidence of the failure of our educational system to teach the basic civics we demand people demonstrate to become naturalized citizens, what do we do with it? We could, as generations before, simply shrug our shoulders and ignore the situation. Where does that lead us? I'm reminded of a joke. Be kind to your children. They will choose your nursing home. I'd like to paraphrase that to educate your children. They will choose those who make and enforce the laws you live under. How can we expect those in government, from legislature to school districts, to respect our rights when we never taught them what they are? As important as it is, civics is ignored. It's not as hard as you would think to teach civics. It's really fairly easy to get started reading and studying the Constitution, knowing your rights, teaching them to your children, not depending on government to teach them to be free. Why? Because government wants subjects, not citizens. They want people they can order around, not be ordered around by. That's why it's up to the parents. It's up to us. It's all up to parents, to grandparents, to friends, to neighbors, anybody willing to not only read and study the Constitution, but teach the rising generation be free. And to show the ongoing decline of this basic understanding explains so much of the controversy today. How many of these activist groups, these riots, revolve around a basic lack of understanding of the basic civics, the basic rights and duties of citizenship? Don't wait around for someone else to fix the problem. Fix it for yourself. Fix it for your family. Fix it for your neighborhood. You can start by going to the website, constitutionstudy.com, and finding out more, asking questions. I love when people ask questions. There's a whole section dedicated to questions. You can find it out through the menu or go to constitutionstudy.com/questions. Of course, you could also email me your questions at constitutionstudy.com. Ask questions and then learn and teach them. That's the importance. That's a fundamental function of a civics education, is knowing those rights. And the best place to do is ask. Of course, you can also support the work that we're doing here at the store, constitutionstudy.com/shop. Yes, you can buy a book, you can buy a t-shirt, you can donate to the cause. Every penny made at the store goes to keeping the Constitution Study up and running. Nobody here takes a salary. Nobody here draws money off the accounts. Everything goes to keeping this up and running. So if you can help by buying a book, by buying a t-shirt, or like I said, just by a one-time recurring donation, that's greatly appreciated. You can also support us with your cell phone. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Not only do they provide great 4G and 5G service across the nation, not only do they have 100% US-based customer support, but they can take a portion of every dollar to support organizations like the Constitution Study that are out there defending your rights and helping you to defend your rights. So join us by going to patriotmobile.com/constitution, finding a plan that works for you, see if you're eligible for a discount while you're at it. And then when you check out, use the code Constitution to get free activation. Supporting your rights and great cell phone service, what more could you ask for? All I ask is you go to patriotmobile.com/constitution, sign up there. I also hope you enjoyed the work that we're doing here. I hope you'll come back the next time and, hey, bring a friend or two the next time we meet for the Constitution Study.